Okay, so what happens when the internet just stops? I mean, really stops. For millions of us, that's exactly what it felt like during the great AWS outage of 2025. So today, we're going to break down what happened when our entire digital world just slammed on the brakes. So think back to Monday, October 20th. You probably grabbed your phone to send a quick message, maybe pay a friend, or just scroll through your feed, and nothing. Just dead air. And I know what you were thinking, is my Wi-Fi down? Nope, it wasn't your Wi-Fi. This was something much, much bigger. And then the first real signs of trouble started rolling in. Some of the world's biggest apps just started blinking out. One by one, the services we use every single day just began to vanish, starting with things like Snapchat. Next up, Reddit. You know, the front page of the internet. It was just gone. All that communication, all that entertainment, all those forums, poof, gone in an instant. And this wasn't just about social media. The outage started to hit us right in the wallet. Financial apps like Venmo, totally inaccessible, which meant simple, everyday things like splitting a dinner bill or paying your friend back just wasn't happening for millions of people. And it just kept on spreading. Gaming platforms like Roblox went dark. And get this, even Amazon's own website and their Alexa services were down. The outage was absolutely massive, and it didn't care what app you were trying to use. So how big are we talking here? Well, Down Detector logged over 4 million separate user reports. 4 million. And you have to remember, that's just the people who actually bothered to go and report the issue. The real number of people affected, it was probably way, way higher. All right, so this clearly wasn't just a couple of websites having a bad day. We're talking a massive global ripple effect. So that brings us to the big question. How? How could so many completely different services all fail at the exact same time? And that really is the central mystery, isn't it? What single thing out there has enough power to cause a global digital traffic jam like this? Well, the answer lies with something you could call the internet's invisible landlord. And that landlord is what we call a cloud provider. So instead of every single company building and running their own servers, which is super expensive and complicated, they just rent computing power from a giant centralized service. And the name behind this particular outage, well, it's the biggest landlord on the block, Amazon Web Services, or as you probably know it, AWS. And I mean, just look at this chart. It really puts their dominance into perspective. AWS isn't just another cloud provider. They are, by a massive margin, the world's largest. They totally dwarf their competitors like Microsoft and Google. They're basically the digital foundation for a huge chunk of the internet, which, as we saw, is why when they have a problem, pretty much everyone has a problem. Okay, so how on earth does the world's biggest, most sophisticated cloud provider just fall over? It seems impossible, right? Well, let's get into the anatomy of this outage and break down the wild technical chain reaction that actually caused this whole mess. So ground zero for all this chaos was a single physical place, a massive cluster of data centers in Northern Virginia known as US East 1. And you got to understand, this isn't just any data center. It's AWS's oldest, it's their largest, and it's one of the most critical hubs for internet traffic in the entire world. And here's the real kicker. This isn't the first time this has happened, not even close. This exact same data center, US East 1, has been the single point of failure for major internet meltdowns at least 3 times in the last 5 years. It caused huge problems back in 2020, again in 2021, and now this global disaster. So what actually broke? Well, to put it simply, it started with a tiny little monitoring system that failed deep, deep inside Amazon's network. But that one small failure kicked off this insane domino effect. It ended up breaking something called the DNS, which you can basically think of as the internet's address book. All of a sudden, apps had no idea how to find the data they needed to run. It's like every GPS in the world simultaneously forgot where all the streets are. Think about that for a second. A single technical glitch in a single building basically brought a huge part of the digital world to a grinding halt. And that, well, that reveals a much bigger and frankly, a more worrying story about the incredibly fragile foundations we've built our digital lives on. And you don't have to take my word for it. Security experts like Jake Moore from ESET say it perfectly. Events like this are just a massive wake-up call,
reminding us how fragile these incredibly complex systems really are. I mean, we rely on them for literally everything, and yet they can be taken down by one single point of failure.
And that right there gets to the real heart of the problem: centralization. As Professor Nishant Sastry points out, the core issue is this huge concentration of risk. It's like all these giant critical companies have decided to build their digital houses on the exact same plot of land, and that land is AWS. So when there's a problem with the land, well, it becomes everyone's problem. And make no mistake, this dependency is not just a US problem. Just look at this list. The ripple effects were felt all over the world. In the UK alone, you're talking major banks, mobile networks like Vodafone, even the government's tax authority. They all went dark. This was a truly global issue. Okay, so this level of fragility is, well, it's clearly not sustainable. So what's the solution? How do we move forward and build a better, more resilient cloud to make sure the next global meltdown doesn't happen? Well, according to experts like Professor Ken Berman from Cornell, the blame isn't entirely on AWS. And this is really interesting. He points out that AWS actually gives developers the tools they need to build in resilience, to protect themselves from an outage in one single location. But here's the catch. Using those tools costs more time and more money. And so, a lot of companies, they cut corners. They choose speed and cost savings over building a truly safe, fault-tolerant system. Which really leaves us with one final and pretty critical question, doesn't it? In our rush to build this super convenient, super cost-effective digital world, have we accidentally built the whole thing on a house of cards? This outage was a massive wake-up call. It's a reminder that the invisible infrastructure holding up our daily lives might just be the most important thing we need to start paying attention to.